Sarah, will you join us on the stage? Let's welcome Sarah. Our live streamers from around the world who are watching on Facebook Live and Twitter also.
Okay. Well, I want to just publicly thank Reverend Ross and Anita Ross for providing us with such a warm welcome and for your leadership. You are incredible leaders, and you have been, especially in some of the most challenging times that we face, a voice of wisdom and unity, and doing that in the capital of the largest state in the union. You are a national leader, and I can't thank you enough for hosting all of us and for all that you do every day for the people of Sacramento, the people of California, the people of our country. So thank you for those things. Oh, it is good to be home. It's so good to be home. I just landed at Sacramento Airport, and I was just, all of my days spent in Sacramento as your Attorney General for almost 8 years. And I can say that I miss this place. I really do miss this place. So I thank you all, and for taking time out of your lives and your busy lives and all of the obligations that each of you has to be with us this afternoon. It really means a lot, and I thank you. There are a lot of leaders in this room. So let's just get right into it. We planned to have this town hall about 2 months ago. And as life happens, and you can't predict what is going to happen in 2 months. And what happened between the time that we planned to do this and today are a number of things that have happened around the globe and around the country and right here in Sacramento. And in particular, of course, let's think about one of the most challenging and difficult and tragic things that has happened recently to this community, and therefore to us as a community and as a state, as a country, is the death of Stefan Carter. And so I'm going to just address that right away, because it is a priority, and it should be a priority. And there is no question that that was a life that should not have been lost. That is a life that should not have been ended. I spoke with his grandmother, and when I think about the work of his family members and friends and this community, in the face of personal and deep grief, being a voice of leadership around an issue that remains a national issue, and doing that work of being those courageous voices and selfless in that way, my heart breaks for what has happened. And I think about this issue for a number of reasons in many ways. I think about it in the context of the loss to that family. I think about it in terms of the work that I have done in my career as a prosecutor. Many of you know my background. I am the child of parents who met while they were active in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. My sister and I joked we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full time marching and shouting about this thing called justice. And right out of Hastings Law School, UC Hastings Law School in San Francisco, I made a decision to become a prosecutor. Some thought it a very curious decision. Members of my family said, well, that's interesting, that's what you've chosen to do. My sister, for example, went on to head the ACLU. But I chose to become a prosecutor. Why? Because, as we all know, law enforcement has a profound profound responsibility and duty to be a voice for the voiceless and the vulnerable. And to do the work of, in a system that is supposed to create public safety, also the responsibility to give all members of the community dignity. And that's why I chose to do that work. I personally prosecuted everything, including homicides. I was your Attorney General, which goes by the moniker of the top cop of, yes, this biggest state in the Union. And when I look at all of the issues that have been presented by what happened to this young man, I am looking at issues that have been challenging our country for decades upon decades upon decades. I look at this issue through the lens of what I did about 3 weekends ago when John Lewis invited me to join him in Selma, Alabama to commemorate that historic walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And as we walked across that bridge, we remembered that about 53 years ago, those young people walking, marching to say all people should have a right to vote, and in particular African Americans should not be denied a right to vote, as they walked that bridge, faced the danger, the physical danger to their bodies of state troopers who were on horses that in some cases were used to trample on those marchers. I look at this issue in the context of history. I look at this issue in the context of now being in Washington, D.C., and looking at the United States Department of Justice being led by somebody who wants to take us back, who is reviving the failed war on drugs, who wants to do all that was such good work under the previous administration to get rid of mandatory minimums, to understand that the disparities around sentencing as applied, in particular to communities of color and poor communities, have got to be abolished. The work that has happened, understanding that if a system of justice in fact is just, meaning the law is equally applied to all, then we have to recognize that those in a position of power and control need to be honest and speak truth about the history and what's happening every day, need to be honest and speak truth about issues like implicit bias and procedural justice and the need for training and the need to acknowledge the realities so that we can, in fact, have a just system. I think about all these issues. I think about it through the lens of having been your Attorney General when, after a series of years of dealing with this, we created in the California Department of Justice the first implicit bias procedural justice training for law enforcement in the state, which has now, the most recent numbers I have received, trained over 2,000 police officers to recognize that we all carry bias. We all do. But when your bias is coupled with the fact that you carry a gun,
that's right. That's right. That's right.
it is something that has to be a priority for us. It should be a priority for all of us anyway. But we've been doing that training, understanding that's the best practice. And then this happens. And I grieve with this community. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And when I think about it again, I think about it not only in the context of Sacramento and California, but I think about it in the context of those people who are on the highest levels of leadership and the need for them to really lead and lead us forward and not backward. So I do want to mention that. And then I'm just going to share with you a couple of other observations about what's been going on. Think of this as Kamala bringing notes from the field. So it's a whole situation in D.C. A friend of mine said, because let me just tell you, so the Capitol, the way it's laid out, and for my friends who are in elected office, so the way that it is laid out, my office is in the Hart Building, in the Senate Hart Building, and that actually was Barbara Boxer's office, and before that, Alan Cranston's office, and I was actually a Senate intern for Alan Cranston when I was in college. So that's kind of neat to be able to be there after I was, a kid there many, many years ago. So you go so when you go to vote, you go to the Capitol building. So my office is not in the Capitol structure, per se. So there's this little train, and if somebody told me it's the same architect, okay, this is going to be very funny. It's the same architect that makes those little trains in Disneyland. So there's this little train that takes you underground from the offices to the Capitol. And when you get off the trains, there is a length of space from about maybe where I'm standing to the door that you must walk to go on the escalator up to go and vote and do your business in the Capitol. And populating this whole area is press. Every day. So my elected friends are looking at me like, are you kidding? Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. Every day. And so they will come and ask you questions, as they have a right to do, as they should do, right? You should be there and be responsive and accessible. And so I do. I answer these questions. And a friend of mine, a fellow Californian, said to me, Kamala, every time you interview, all you keep saying, it's very troubling. He said to me, why don't you just say what you tell me? It's a hot mess. So, that being said, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. And in a moment of real seriousness, they put a target on California's back. This administration has put a target on our back. So and now this may sound with a bit of bravado that I'll say this, but I say it with pride as a child of California. We have 40 million people in California, the largest population of any state in the country. We are the, I don't know, 5th, 6th largest economy in the world, depending on where Brazil is at any moment. You know, I know as our Attorney General from before, previous Attorney General, we have the largest population of consumers of any state, right? Which means we're consuming a lot of products, and I'll get to that point in a moment. So, any issue that is being addressed in Washington, D.C., just on the map alone is going to have an outsized impact on California. But when you couple that with the fact that, and I say again with pride, hopefully not bravado, that I believe that old adage to be true, so goes California, goes the rest of the country. When you look at the things that we have done and who we are, it highlights that point about the focus being on who we are and what we do. We have the largest number of immigrants, documented or undocumented, of any state in the country. We have been a national leader for decades on what it means to be smart about addressing climate change and prioritizing the needs of the We have been a leader on saying, let us take a look at how we can be creative in creating the jobs of the 21st century, while also understanding that consistent with that, we should keep in place workers' rights to collectively bargain. These are the things and so many more upon which we lead. And we have an administration right now that is targeting these issues in the work we have done. And I have to tell you, and Doris knows this, we talk about this all the time. She and I break bread together in D.C. and speak fondly of, oh, wouldn't it be nice to be home right now? What we know is that we are very fortunate in California to have so many leaders who are here in our state capitol, community leaders, business leaders, just leaders across the board who are holding it up and holding it down. This is a time that it is critical that we keep doing that and that we stand proud with our chin up and our shoulders back and we fight. And let's be clear that when we fight, I think it's imperative that we understand we are fighting not against something, we are fighting for something. It is critically important. It is critically important that when people look at us, you know, it's an interesting thing. Some people would say, you know, that kind of behavior, the marching and the shouting and the organizing and the protesting, that seems a bit subversive, some people might say. Well, I reject that notion. I reject that notion. But here's the thing. Let's be clear, because what we are doing when we are doing all of that is about fighting for the best of who we are as a country. You know, I think there are two definitions of what it means to be a patriot. One that suggests you condone the conduct of your country, whatever it does. And then there is the kind of patriot I know us all to be. The kind that will fight each and every day for the ideals of our country. Yeah. And that's what this movement is about. And as my friends or the leaders of Bill Black will say, this is about something that is not about a moment, it's about a movement. Yeah. So, there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to close this part of it so we can actually get into the conversation with all the friends and the folks that are here. By again just saying thank you all, and I look forward to having this conversation.
Awesome. Let's get it. So someone asked, why is the senator coming? And I simply said, she's coming, and what's her agenda? What is she here to tell us about? I said, she's coming to listen to us. She wants to hear what's going on, and she wants to see how she can best respond to it. And so we start with some folks who are not in the room. There are people who have submitted questions from Facebook, who are watching Facebook Live. Give Facebook Live some love. And what we're going to do is ask questions. We'll come back into the room in a moment. If you have a question for the senator, raise your hand. There are mic runners. Where are mic runners? Can you come out to the aisle so they can see you a little bit? Come on, show yourselves. There's one here and one there. And they should be wearing tennis shoes because there's a lot of space to cover, okay? We'll start with Facebook. Start formulating your question. We'll be right with you. This one is from Kyle Sweeney, who asked, will you support legislation taking corporate money out of elections and overriding Citizens United?
Yes. So let's also let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
You know, every election year, and in particular those elections that come every 4 years, and I know the folks who are in this room, all of us have been active. And one of the most important and least persuasive reasons that people have for getting involved and caring about these elections, most important, least persuasive, the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court. So, elections matter. And right now, we've got a United States Supreme Court that is sitting on a decision they have will be rendering very shortly about organized labor and its right to collectively bargain and all of the need that we have to make sure, right, that our unions, as they've always been, can be the protectors of working people and their rights in terms of fair and equal pay and benefits and workplace safety. Right now, that's before the United States Supreme Court. All of the issues that have impacted so many of us. Brown v. Board of Education had Earl Warren, former Attorney General of California, not led the unanimous United States Supreme Court to decide Brown v. Board of Education, I wouldn't be standing here. United States Supreme Court, Citizens United, the United States Supreme Court, has probably forever changed the way elections happen. In terms of the influence, the outsized influence of money. And, you know, one of the things, and you've heard the committees that I'm on, including, yes, Budget, Judiciary, Homeland Security, and Senate Intelligence. So I am, on a daily basis, briefed about national security issues, where we are in the context of our neighbors around the globe. One of the things that has been a source of strength for us in terms of our standing internationally has been that we can say we have a true democracy. Yes, it's not without its flaws, but we have a true democracy. We have free and fair elections. Citizens United is threatening that concept. When a handful of people who have the greatest amount of wealth can manipulate the outcome of an election because they have the money to influence the minds of others. So Citizens United has proved to be something, I believe, that has challenged the notion of what it means to have a free and fair election process. And one of the best antidotes, like I'm not going to leave us there with this, right? One of the best antidotes then, one of the best ways that we can deal with that is to make sure, you know, because here's the crude reality of politics. Nobody's naive in here. Communities have influence around elections one of two ways. Write checks and vote.
Say that again, just so that they can hear you on the East Coast.
Write checks or vote. Unfortunately, I'm talking about the crude reality of how this works. And of course, there are exceptions. So what we should be thinking about always when we talk about the injustice that has that Citizens United has induced, let us also remember we're not without power in the face of that injustice. What it does is it highlights our need to make sure communities vote. And as a precursor to that, it means first, making sure folks register to vote. And to make sure, and again, back to Edmund Pettus Bridge, and then what else the Supreme Court did when they gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013. Okay, let's talk about another thing the United States Supreme Court did. Gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, and since then, 10 separate federal court decisions finding intentional interference. One, I'm quoting now, said that the state with, quote, surgical precision in North Carolina, with surgical precision, attempted to dissuade African American voters. So it's about making sure communities vote. First, we got to make sure they register to vote, and we've always got to keep our eye and mind on voter suppression happening in all communities, and making sure that we are alert to the fact of that, and that we are loud about the injustice of it when it occurs. So,
all right. If you have a question, raise your hand, and we're going to get a mic runner out. I see hands right here. Just quickly. Right over here. Right there. Young man, stand up so that we can get you quickly.
My name is Julio Molina, and I am part of the SEIU UHW Community Division. I'm a community team leader and a DACA recipient who stands with an 11 million undocumented families. With the Trump administration threatening to leverage immigration reform to build this futile wall, my request to you, Senator Harris, rather than just making an attempt to temporarily fix DACA, can you commit today that you will bring forth legislation with the Democratic Party in a bipartisan way to once and for all pass a comprehensive immigration reform?
Absolutely. For example, the DREAM Act. But let's talk more about this. So everybody here knows we have in California about 220,000 DACA recipients, and just so we can be really clear about population size and numbers, that's DACA recipients. It's a much larger number if we're talking about dreamers, because not all dreamers have applied for DACA. Okay. But let's be clear about what DACA is. Okay, it's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, so it's an acronym, DACA. And it came about because President Obama realized that Congress was not acting. And so through presidential executive order, he implemented a policy whereby we would defer deportation of dreamers who fit the qualifications. Now this is important. So the qualifications included looking at when they arrived, did they arrive before a certain date, looking at the context of their arrival and their family, and asking them all these questions, by the way, because that's how we determine qualification. They had to give us the information. We asked them, are they living a productive life? Have you graduated high school? Are you working? What are you doing? We did background checks, including criminal background checks. Have you ever committed a crime? And if they qualified, we then asked them to pay $495. Okay, I have to keep breaking stuff down for a minute. So just to put that in context, federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Almost $500 is a lot of money.
That's right.
Okay. But if they cleared the vet and they paid the money and they applied, they would receive DACA protection. That was the plan. And that was implemented. Then this administration comes in and arbitrarily makes a decision to rescind it on September 5th of last year. I was at the time and still on Homeland Security Committee, as you all have heard. And so I had the experience in the early days of this administration and the early days of my time in DC to be on committees where we were supposed to confirm nominees. And so the nominee at that time was now the Chief of Staff to the President, John Kelly. And I asked him, will you keep America's promise to these young people? And he would not commit. I then held up a piece of paper, which was paid for by the United States taxpayers. It was a government piece of paper, FAQs, frequently asked questions, and it was part of the frequently asked questions of DACA applicants. And the question was, if I give you this information, will you share it with ICE? And you know what it said on this piece of paper as the answer? No. Will you keep the person I'm asking you who wants to be the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security? And I asked his successor the same question. Will you keep America's promise to these young people? Would not commit. Would not commit. So just on that piece alone, we're talking about, when we raise our children, we say, keep your word. And the United States government is not even willing to keep its word to these young people. And on top of that, we arbitrarily pulled the plug on the thing. And on top of that, be clear about who this population is. They are serving in our colleges. They are serving in they're in our colleges. They're serving in our military. They're working in Fortune 100 to 500 companies. Right? And what is happening? Well, this guy said he was going to build a wall, and he just threw a flame down, and he's throwing red meat to folks. at the point of traumatizing hundreds of thousands of our young, bright people. Traumatizing them. But I'm going to say this too, guys, again, silver linings. We always have to hold on to those, okay? We designed a beautiful system of government. Again, flawed though it may be. But we designed a really, it was a good design. You know, I was recently reading 1776. I don't know if any of you read it. We designed it really, you know, think about it, right? Like, how gangster those guys were about it. You know, we said, no, there's the 4th Amendment. You can't come in here and take my stuff. You know, the 5th, the 6th Amendment. No, if you're going to bring the weight of the government and accuse me, I got to have a lawyer, right? It's just all that. Well, the other part of the government that we designed is we said, and so I think of it as the tabletop that is our democracy, our republic, stands on 4 legs, which are the 3 independent, co-equal branches of government, and then a free and independent press. And the beauty of what is happening in the face of things like DACA is that we see that investigative work happening with our free and independent press. We hope Congress acts, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but our courts are holding it down. And so the current situation with DACA is that our courts have said, nope, hold back, can't do that, we're putting a freeze on that. We're putting a freeze on you, administration, who is trying to rescind DACA. So that's the good news. But to the point of your question, that's temporary. We've got to act, and Congress has to have the courage to do that.
Thank you. Are you ladies stand? Please stand. And then I saw, he's gone.
I'm right here.
Where are you?
Right here.
There, all right, the 7 man. Get close to him, he's excited.
Hi, my name is Katrina Dunn. I live in Auburn, California. I'm really upset about the unauthorized disclosure of my personal information on Facebook. So I want to know what you want to learn about the Cambridge Analytica situation when Mark Zuckerberg comes to testify in the Senate next week.
Yeah. I'm very concerned about it too. And yes, he will be coming. This is what we hear next week, Tuesday, I believe, before 2 committees that would be joined for the purpose of this. And so one of them that I'm on is Senate Judiciary. Listen, there is, you know, back to those points we were raising earlier about the Constitution of the United States and the protections that we put in place that are part of a democracy, and one is the right to privacy. And I'm very concerned that, one, that if there was any interference with that, if there was any suggestion to consumers, to the users, that they were in a safe space. And there appears to have been no notification to even tell people this happened to them. And that's a problem. You know, when I was Attorney General, our California legislature had, during that time, passed legislation that required corporations to disclose to the California Department of Justice when they had been hacked, when there had been a breach, a data breach. Because we were seeing that some companies would tell when your information that they keep was manipulated, and sometimes they wouldn't. So the California legislature, in its wisdom, passed a law that said that for certain types, the biggest ones, you have to report it so that the consumers can know that somebody has stolen their information. And the reason is because you need to know, because it's your information. And it's about your right to privacy and your right to decide who you want to share your things with. So it goes to a very essential issue that is about privacy, and therefore when someone takes it from you, the violation that is a part of that. It is about your rights to know and to then control what you will choose to do. And so for a lot of reasons, I'm very, very concerned about what happened, and I look forward to getting some answers.
Okay. The gentleman over here, and then I saw the lady way in the back who was waving the pink hat, and then was over next. Okay, so in that order.
Nice hat, by the way. Okay, I want to ask you something extremely specific, okay, because I'm hoping for a very specific answer.
Okay.
Okay, it has to do with the first question about money in politics, but it's directed at you personally, and my question is this. If a corporation or a corporate lobbyist wants to give you money for a campaign, will you tell them thanks but no thanks?
Well, it depends. It depends. I mean,
Wrong answer.
Well, if that's not the answer you want to hear, it doesn't make it wrong. Thank you for asking, and I appreciate the reasons you're asking. I do appreciate that. Because, and that's why we have rules that require that any donation that anyone receives needs to be disclosed. So that you can do an assessment, and the voters can do an assessment, and look at where the contributions come from, and make your decisions about whether those contributions have influenced the way that people act and the way that people vote. And so I'm an open book there. Feel free to look at it and then draw your own conclusions about what has motivated me and what hasn't.
That's enough.
Thank you. My name is Barbara Grass. I started an action group in Roseville in the 4th Congressional District in front of Kamala's office last year. I know that the word is out. It's called the Rat Pack Resistance Action Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's amazing. So we have been in front of that office every Tuesday and almost every Thursday since the inauguration. And my motivation came when I heard the current person occupying the White House talk about he denigrated Mexicans and Muslims right out of the box. And my family are Holocaust survivors. They lived through that exact same issue in Germany in the 30s.
Let's have your question, though.
My question is, what happened is that we've been out there peacefully demonstrating for over a year. And once the Parkland shootings happened, we were descended upon by Second Amendment gun rights people. And they've been ugly and harassing, and they are out there now with us every week. And I'm just wondering if there is something you might give me and my group to try to deal with that. I've promoted peaceful demonstration, non-engagement, and they want to irritate, agitate, and spread that across the interwebs.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, if they're peaceful, of course, there is nothing we can do about that. The only thing we can do, which history has shown us to be more powerful, is to not relent in terms of using our voice and organizing and speaking truth. And as we know, even just recent history in terms of the Parkland kids, speaking truth, it invites often people who don't like to hear that truth to try and suppress you. And we can never be suppressed. We cannot be suppressed. And the other thing I will say to you is this. Take a look around this room right now and hold on to the belief, which is my belief, that you've got a lot of people supporting you, even if you don't see them at that moment when all of that is happening. There are more of us. But it is a reality that in times like this, and in particular in this time where we are seeing very powerful people sow hate and division in a way we have not seen in a long time in our country. So this is a time that really is presenting a particular kind of challenge to do the kind of organizing and truth telling that you're doing. So thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Senator, it's great to see you again. My name is Cassandra Jennings with the Greater Sacramento Urban League, but I stand before not a moment. And I really appreciate you coming out from the very beginning, understanding that our community has been traumatized. And our hearts go out to the families of Stephon Clark and all of us who've been affected by that. We say, let's use this moment for an opportunity to make a movement. And so we are a coalition that you talked about of activists, of nonprofits, of faith leaders, of communities, of experts, and it's growing to all make a difference here in the fight for equity. We're on 4 pillows, and then I do have a question.
All right.
And the pillows are, and I saw you pass it. Okay, and the pillows are around lifting up the voices of the youth, policing and justice, policing in our community. That's the second one. The third one is about health equity and access. And the last one is about investing in our Black communities and our neighborhoods. And so my question to you is, where can the federal government and how can you ensure us that federal actions and resources will be available for us to address trauma in our communities, to really begin to build up Black communities, and really to support the fight for equity and justice? That's my question.
The issue of equality is one issue, equity is a different issue. And it's critically important that we have equity in addition to equality. And yes, so the short answer is yes, of course I support that and will support that. I've done work for many, many years on the issue of what we need to do to bring resources into communities that have experienced trauma. And those are communities that have experienced trauma as the result of violence in those communities, and those are also communities that experience trauma as a result of poverty. Poverty inflicts trauma.
Right.
Let's be clear about that. And so it's about recognizing what we've got to do to help communities heal and also uplift. And it's about also economic opportunity. And we need to do a much better job because we all know, there's a saying, it's not mine, it's Father Boyle, actually, in Los Angeles, and he says, nothing stops a bullet like a job. Right? And, I was just talking with Robbie Hunter, who's the head of the building trades of California, about the work that he's been doing here in Sacramento. I've been talking with him about this for years and the work he's been doing as a labor leader with the building trades around the state, saying that we've got to look at, development projects that are happening, look at other projects that are taking place that are creating jobs and making sure the community is being tapped into in terms of taking advantage of the natural resources of the community and uplifting around job training and then jobs actually being given to the folks who earn those jobs. So the federal government has a very important role to play in that. And that comes through also, it comes through HUD. There's all this talk about what's going to happen around building infrastructure. Well, fantastic, let's build some infrastructure. We need to, we have over, I think it's something like $70 billion of unmet transportation needs in California. Those are jobs.
Yeah, those are jobs.
And the federal government has got to do its part to actually walk its talk. So yes, I will support that, of course.
Okay, young lady, right here. The young lady with the red-ish strawberry hair will be next. And I saw someone over here. Let's be fair, get over here a little bit. And then I think we're going to be reaching the gentleman with the, there it is. Okay, let's move in that order.
Hello, my name is Rosemary Ramirez. I'm a proud Sacramento State student, and my question to you is, considering the lack of action from Congress to pass an immigration reform and or provide a permanent pass for dreamers, what can you say to all the dreamers across the state to take hold?
Keep doing what you've been doing. So I told you about my office is in the Hart building. It's on the first floor, and I've actually been keeping a sign in front of my office for the duration of this time. It's a big sign, and it says, "Dreamers are welcome here." And in my office, the front door is right next to one of the entrances to the building, and so these kids from all over the country, adopted kids, have been coming in. You know, we have like snacks and stuff for them, and they sometimes just hang out in my office just to rest while they're there, and they're there. And again, this is about something that is a source of upliftment for me, frankly. They're there in thousands, the numbers in thousands. They've been coming. They have been traveling to our nation's capital. God only knows how they're affording to get there. Buses, trains, cars. I am certain, Reverend, that they're sleeping on someone's living room floor 10 people deep. And they've been coming to the United States Capitol every day because they believe that if they are seen and if their stories are heard, it will matter. They believe in our democracy. They believe in our democracy. And that's powerful because they are the future of our country. And they are leaders right now. And so my request of you is you keep leading. You keep leading. And know that the opponents of this are on the wrong side of history. They are on the wrong side of history. And this is a movement. This is a great movement. Back to, again, John Lewis, Edmund Pescud, King, Dr. King, we just celebrated, they were all in their 20s. Dr. King was in his mid-20s when he organized the bus boycott. John Lewis, I think, was 21 when he was walking that bridge. All the great movements have been by our students and our young people. So you keep leading. Right? Chin up, shoulders back. Proud. Be proud. Be proud.
All right.
Thank you. My name is Sarah DeZio, and I'm with Indivisible San Francisco. We look to you, Senator, as a light of progress within the Democratic Party. You have said in the past that the firing of Robert Mueller would be a red line, and we wonder what that means to be a red line. Will you state unequivocally that the firing of this special counsel would be an impeachable offense?
I can't imagine how it would be. Let's be clear that, we already have, as you know, right, everybody here knows, we already have the history where Comey was fired. There's an active investigation going on. It is clearly a productive investigation. And it is clearly active and on its way and in process. And a firing of Bob Mueller cannot be interpreted in any way other than the belief that they are trying to shut down the investigation. It can't be interpreted in any other way. And that would be, in my belief, that would be an impeachable offense.
And then the other gentleman here. 1, 2, and 3. I'm sorry, I apologize, I missed it. So let's do the gentleman with the cowboy hat. We're working on a non-violent. Stay near, so I don't lose your out of my sight. Gentleman with the cowboy hat. Our friend here, right in the back. Right here, in the front, and then it looks like it's raining men over here. Our gentleman right here. Okay, and then you'll be the last question, because I think we'll be complete at that point. Young lady, set up so they'll know she's last. Right there. Okay, about last. Okay, you may be seated. And Lupe up front. Okay. Everybody, let's do some woosah. All right, let's trust for a moment. Let's trust that if you don't get to ask the question, maybe your question will be addressed in a question that is asked by one of your neighbors, since we're in the spirit of being neighborly today. And then we may get opportunities in a little while after. There may be something that will allow you to say some other things to the senator. Okay, let's proceed in that order.
My name is Mario Galvan. I'm a member of Peace Action here in Sacramento and the national level. In terms of the discussion here of equality and bringing resources to our communities, at a moment when our government is spending $80 million an hour on our military, I'd like to ask your thoughts on the militarization of not just our nation, but our local police as well, and on our foreign policy. You could address that, please.
Well, we should not be militarizing our police. And after what's happening on the foreign policy level and in terms of foreign affairs and national security, let's have that conversation. This is an administration that has whittled down the State Department. We don't have, we have virtually no diplomatic corps in most of the significant hotbed areas of the world. They're literally from the inside destroying the State Department. This administration has not understood that, yes, we need to have a military, but there is untold strength in what I like to call muscular diplomacy. And there is no understanding of that. There is no appreciation of that. There's all this tough talk, this strongman approach that may be getting us absolutely nowhere except to draw us into fire where we don't want to be. And it's extremely dangerous. And frankly, I will tell you, what concerns me is that there's so much other stuff that's happening every day. I mean, goodness gracious, every day. Like, also, guys, find some time from time to time to just turn off cable. Because, we all need to kind of, we're all existing with a certain level of anxiety that is, we need to deal with, and because this needs to be sustainable. We need to keep up our strength, and we cannot become accommodationist to all this stuff. But all of this stuff that's happening every day, and we're really not talking enough about it, giving enough attention to the point that you're raising, which is national security, and are we being smart with the limited resources of the federal government? And that means critically looking at what we're doing with budgets, and where are we putting our resources, and are we doing that in a smart way? And it is a smart thing to do on national security, to pay attention to diplomacy. The other thing that we're not talking about is, let's be clear, in spite of what the president might say. Russia interfered with the election of the president of the United States. There is no doubt about that. There's no doubt. It's not a debatable point. And when you look at it, one of the issues where we are extremely vulnerable is on the issue of cybersecurity. It's a big issue. And if we're going to talk about where we're putting resources in terms of national security, we've got a huge need for addressing that. The way that I think about it and talk about it is we need to be prepared for wars without blood.
Better than anybody.
Wars without blood. When you talk about our infrastructure, around our financial systems, stock exchange, when you talk about our infrastructure around the medical systems and healthcare delivery, our banking systems, our public utilities, our energy systems and grids. We are extremely vulnerable. And we have already seen a demonstration of intention to manipulate our critical systems. Our election system has been designated and was designated by the previous administration to be critical infrastructure. And it was manipulated. So we know foreign adversaries have already demonstrated not only their desire, but their ability, not only their desire, but their intention to interfere with critical infrastructure of the United States. It's a very serious matter. And on all of these issues, we need to focus. And it cannot be about thinking about fighting our adversaries and fighting wars circa 1920.
The presence of the grandmother of Stephan Clark who just ended.
Stop the applause.
We want you to know before you came here that there was talk of the concern with Stephan Clark. The citizens in this town are with you. We love you and we're praying with you. And we thank you for bringing your energy to us so we can heal with you. God bless you. Everybody put the hat on. Show everybody the hat.
Okay, hello. My name is Kenneth Roberts. I just recently retired from the Navy as the Chief Petty Officer medically after 12 years. This is great. We can all laugh about that. I love that. But hear me out for a second. All these issues are interconnected in ways that most people don't understand. Okay? With that being said, there's something in the news that's not in headlines, that's not being discussed, coming from all sides and coming from us individually. That being is our huge debt. Now, California recently found out that it's $1 trillion in debt. Most of that comes from pensions, because we all want our pension. I'm a pensioner. I just got medically retired. I live off of my pension. So who do we blame? We have violence. We have outrage. We have crazy things happening in communities, all based off of money. We have Russia able to exploit that. We have many of the
form it as a question.
My question, you're right, good. My question with all this, because there's not a good answer, and I don't know one, is how do we backtrack on our greed of money as individuals, as a society, as a world, to then take away the problems that are facing all of us in this room right this second?
Repeat it one more time, real clean and sharp.
It's almost no answer, I don't think.
Just your question, though.
The answer is,
your question.
With the debt that we have, being the microcosm of this country's debt, causing lots of problems, how do we backtrack on what we created over generations?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, and thank you for your service, and thank you. I'd like to just, well, one,
I'm alive.
You're absolutely right. The deficit, this tax cut, $1 trillion, it's going to add to the deficit. It has given benefits that are going to be permanent for corporations and temporary for working families. And we're going to see how that plays out in terms of the lack of resources then going into essential services for our retired military, for others. And so it was.
Wait a minute. Wait. Let her respond to the question, okay?
My thing is,
trillion of debt that LA Times found out has in this state mostly comes from individual pensioners and people from the government, people that have 3 pensions and retirement age 60, 55, etc.
We have to reevaluate.
That's what I'm getting at.
That's no question. You're right. We do. And we have to, and everybody's going to have to be at the table for that conversation because we have got, hold on, that's my turn. Because we also have to keep our promise to all of those people who work and we made a promise to them. And we've got to keep those promises. But I would like to also address the way that you led up to the question with another point. And it is the point about all of these issues, and are they connected or not? And that relates to, I think, another thing that is happening right now, which is this whole conversation that's taking place about, are we a divided America? And I'm going to tell you, I reject that notion. I reject that notion. I don't believe we are divided. I believe the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. I know it to be true. I think about it in the context of my life experiences, my professional experiences. I think it in the context of that thought that wakes us up in the middle of the night. You know, they call it the witching hour. Some people, you know, it's usually around 3 in the morning. Right? When you wake up with that thought that has been weighing on you, sometimes in a cold sweat, when the vast majority of us wake up with that thought, it is never through the lens of the party with which we're registered to vote.
That's right.
When the vast majority of us wake up with that thought, it is never through the lens of some demographic a pollster put us in. And for the vast majority of Americans, that thought has to do with one of just a very few things. Their personal health, the health of their children or their parents. Can I get a job? Can I keep a job? Can I pay the bills by the end of the month? Can I retire with dignity for students? Can I pay off those student loans? For the vast majority of us, we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I think at these moments, where there is so much spewing of division and hate, it is important for us to remember that. It is important for us to remember that all mothers and grandmothers grieve when they lose their child. It is important for us to remember. All people are concerned about, are they going to be able to live a life of dignity and work hard and retire with dignity and have a pension in place that doesn't bankrupt their government? That's a fair point. The vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. And I truly believe that.
We all see red.
That's right. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Good evening, Senator. I'm deeply grateful for you being here. My name is Malachi Amen, President and CEO of the California Urban Partnership. I wanted to add quick context to my question. And that context includes, very quick context. And that context includes how, whether we like it or not, we're seeing legalization of marijuana emerge throughout the country. And in that emergence, what we're seeing is the reality that it will take still 235 years for the average black family's wealth to catch up with the average white family's wealth, and not anything intentional being done about the legalization of marijuana that will repair the trauma, that will repair racialized law enforcement killing our children instead of reinvesting that money back into the communities that were damaged by the war on drugs. And so I would like to know about the extent to which you are willing to work with us here in California and your colleagues in DC to uplift a repair type of formula that helps us to do something about racial wealth gaps and also make sure that the legalization of marijuana doesn't become another cotton or sugar or tobacco, where we work for free and we did all of the jail time but reap none of the benefits.
I know you guys thought. That's our history.
And let's make sure we follow up. Okay. All right.
All right. I'm going to call Lupe. I understand this is our last question.
You missed me.
Okay, wait.
You missed me.
Time out.
I was the next.
Let me just check with the staff here for a minute. Do we have time for one more question? The senator
I was in a line. I was waiting.
Take a couple.
All right, the senator is going to take a couple. The gentleman here, and then Lupe. That was the order that we were flowing in, okay?
Can I get a mic?
Let's get a mic to him.
Your voice is really nice. I'm sure you're fine.
It's not like good protection, like it's everything else. They work more than you!
Alright, well, let's take the next question. So, there you go, have to do head.
All right.
Yeah, yes. Thank you for going up, sir. Thank you.
We appreciate the question, but if she doesn't have a chance to respond, you would have, it would have been a self-defeating question. So hold on, give her a chance to quickly respond, and then we're going to need to wrap this up. Okay? So she's going to answer your question, and we're going to complete. Unfortunately, we will have to bring it to an end. Senator?
Well, I'm going to answer the question of the folks who've been raising their hands and have chosen. I'm happy to answer your question also, because you've been standing for a while. Yeah, so let's give him the microphone. Thank you.
Good evening, Senator. My name is Sumaya Saruthi, and I'm representing the Behind Parents. So I heard you on the dreamers and data, and I appreciate it. My question is that what about the American children, those who are illegally retained in a country like India? And according to the Department of State, California tops among all the states in international parental child protection.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand the question. You're asking about children who are in India?
Yeah, illegally retained in India.
I don't know a lot about the issue. I'm happy to look into it and follow it. Okay, so the gentleman is asking, do you want to restate your question, sir?
Why are you putting illegals before the American people?
Got it.
Okay. So I am not putting anyone before anyone else. If you really want to get an answer to the question, listen.
Oh wow, short memory there.
If you want to get the answer, then I will give you the answer. If you want to keep talking, you can keep talking, but I'm going to move on. So it's your choice. So.
All emotion.
Listen, it's about, we've got to treat everyone equally.
That's
and it's
right.
not choosing one over.
Due process.
It's about understanding that when we're talking about the issue of immigration, on that subject, the approach this administration has taken is not just, it is not fair, It is not about giving people due process or equal opportunity. And that's the answer. And now I'm going to move on. My name is Lupe Trevisor Hernandez. I'm from Rancho Cordova, and to answer the gentleman's question about going back in terms of the marijuana and the fields, I think it would piggyback with his yelling that if it wasn't for immigrants, who would pick the crops? What about the immigrants? But my issue is, Ms. Harris, Senator Harris, with police department and the sheriff's department being under scrutiny, under the microscope of the public, will more accountability be done to make local agencies to violations of discrimination for people of color? Not just African American, not just Latinos, everybody, people of color, disabled, including, but not only, people with mental health issues. I'm talking about civil rights violations, ADA violations. Audio and video equipment should be put in every lobby and required in every lobby of every law enforcement agency. In every lobby. I personally experienced firsthand discrimination on 2 occasions, March 7th and 8th, in Rancho Cordova by Rancho Cordova Police Department.
Well, yeah,
because I am disabled. I have muscular dystrophy.
It's Rancho.
I cannot walk. I can stand, but not walk. So when a Native American with an immigrant mother, my mother was deported when I was a child, sir. We are here and we're not going anywhere. Yes, accountability, I want to talk about that. But I also want to I think it's important that in this conversation that people remember history also, on a number of levels, including this. So recently I was very proud to sponsor legislation to bring rights to a certain group of workers that have been denied the right to minimum wage and overtime pay. And they are the farm workers. Let's talk about history for a moment. It's really important to know this. So back when the Fair Labor Standards Act was being proposed in the United States Congress, this was years and years and years and years ago. Johnson administration, I believe it was. In order to get the Southern Democrats in the United States Congress to sign on to giving protections through the Fair Labor Standards Act, to create the Fair Labor Standards Act. In order to get the Southern Democrats to sign on, well, the Southern Democrats said, no, I don't want those to apply to my field workers who are picking cotton in the South, who had recently, only recently, become free citizens, supposedly. So, to address that, because they didn't want it applying to their field workers or their domestic servants, the Fair Labor Standards Act didn't include protections for domestic workers and for people who work in the fields also known as farm workers. So let's be clear about the history of the connections between populations of people in this country and previous struggles and current struggles and the need for solidarity. On the accountability issue, there is no question. We have got to have more transparency, more accountability, and when the facts have been shown and proven, severe and swift accountability and consequence where there's been wrongdoing. There is no question. And we are not doing a good job. We are not doing a good job on that. And you couple that with an administration, and in particular the United States Department of Justice, now led by Jeff Sessions, and they have been deconstructing the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. They closed the previous administration's commitment to investigating patterns and practice of discrimination within law enforcement. They are shutting down consent decrees. They have systematically shown they have no intention of not only taking the matter seriously, but giving it any attention at all. And so we've got a struggle on our hands. We've got a struggle on our hands. And, you know, that's another reason why we have to keep marching and shouting and speaking up and speaking loud and organizing. And I'll close my comments saying this. Part of all great movements, we were talking about this earlier, part of all great movements is getting back to that point and recognizing we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And so, because it is that spirit that fuels the thing that makes movements the strongest, and that's building the coalition. Building the coalition. Marching arm in arm together, understanding the commonality of our priorities and our purpose. And we've got to do that right now. We've got to do that in a way that we have not had to do it in a long time. But this community, the folks who are here in Sacramento, have been doing that. And I applaud you and I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. Thank you for trying to take that.
Not done that. I'm not playing that either.